Here we go.
So, classical online question first. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody also from my side. I'm happy that you found time to join us this early morning. From my side, we will do two people that you will hear from this morning. First, that will be me. I'm giving you a short introduction about the two most fish species that we're going to talk about. And then Maurice will join in and talk a bit about his view and some work he is doing on welfare assessment in Spain. So I'm happy that we have a bit of a mix-up. And I thought that we built today's webinar like a little bit a pyramid. So we begin with fish biology, and we focus on the two most important species currently in Africa and Middle East, which is African catfish and the Nile tilapia. And then we talk a little bit about fish health, why it is important and how we can ensure it, how we can keep it. After that, we add actually a topic about welfare, how this adds up to health. If we have laid like this basic knowledge, we talk about assessment. How can we assess fish health and welfare in our systems? And after that, we see how to apply all the knowledge that we now have on the farm. And last and really not least is how do you that joins the webinar and are part of all the projects as an idea of train the trainer, how do you pass on that knowledge? So let's start with the tilapia. Just as a first thing, tilapia is not always tilapia. So the Latin name tilapia is actually a genus with only a few remaining species. When we talk about tilapia, we often mean the Nile tilapia. That is native to a large part of Africa, but is meanwhile quite globally used as a very important aquaculture species. There are a lot of subspecies used, and there are actually different species that even in Africa can be used locally. And if possible, the use of local species is often very beneficial to aquaponics and aquaculture systems. As for the biology, species is native to a large part of Africa. It's a warm water cichlid. So as a cichlid, they're already very robust. Most of the time, it's a freshwater species, although it is known to be very tolerant to brackish water if you adapt them slowly. It's a social fish, so they have a lot of social interaction that sometimes also comes with a bit of problems then for us in aquaculture because it brings territorial and dominant behavior. And if left alone, they could actually live quite a long time and reach quite an impressive size. Because the tilapia has adapted to or is native to such a wide range, it also can adapt or has learned to live in a very wide range of environmental settings. So it means that if you have the fish, they have a wide tolerance and they can adapt easily to slow changes. It does not necessarily mean that a single tilapia or your group of fish that you have in your tank will deal well with fast and large changes. But it means that if you have your population, let me go back here, pointer, there. If you have your whole population that can adapt to all these ranges, your species can be somewhere here or your population that you have, and you can change them as long as those adaptations go slowly. In husbandry, these are our tilapia that we have at our place. We have the red tilapia because we see them a bit easier in our systems compared to the usually rather gray color that the natural strains have. We keep them something between 25 to 32 degrees. There are strains and local adaptations that can go lower or higher, but usually not both. So either you have a bit of a heat adapted strain or you have a cold adapted strain. They like still, as most of the fish, a lot of oxygen, but they can deal with little oxygen values. Tilapia usually does not mind that much if it's down to 2 milligrams per liter. pH, same, wide range, salinity also. Have in mind that some populations adapted a bit to higher salinities. Not all of them can stay in high salinities up to 20 per mil for a long time. So keep them in normal fresh water, that's best for them. They're not like the strongest swimmer, but they can deal easily with 2 body lengths per second. So if you have a bit of a current, that's not a problem. They do not like too much the direct sunlight, so either shade your tanks, or usually you have them also in ponds that have a lot of algae, and they can go a little bit down, and then they are shaded from direct sunlight. And depending on if you have an aquaponic system, you may want to have a lot of nitrate, but also for the tilapia, I wouldn't go much higher than 300. If you have the tilapia in your system, you need to know a bit where he comes from to give him the water parameters that he likes, but you also need to know what he's eating in nature so that you can feed him properly. And Nile tilapias are herbivores that can have carnivorous tendency, especially when they are young. So here what you see is a tilapia stomach, which is rather small, and then a very long intestine. That's perfect for the digestion of plant-based food. It takes a long time to digest so that you can get all the nutrients out. Juveniles often feed also on zooplankton and zoobenthos and algae as well. You can easily feed your adults vegetarian food. So this is a very positive point for aquaculture for the Nile tilapia, because you can feed it in a more sustainable way because it doesn't need much fish meal and fish oil. Have in mind that the same as tilapia need all the macronutrients that they are, including the micronutrients with vitamins and minerals. So we need to ensure that this is in the feed that we are giving. And I recommend that if you're interested in having tilapia, or you already have and want to learn more, there's a FAO page. So if you Google FAO and then Nile tilapia, will come to a page that looks like this. And you do have a lot of very solid information on growth, nutritional requirements. There's a little bit of an explanation how to make your own food. You have a lot of tables, how to feed them. That's a very good information page to get your knowledge on the Nile tilapia. For me, tilapia, because it is herbivorous, have in mind that the feeds for other species like catfish or trout are not suitable for them. They need less protein, and they should have less protein in it. I wouldn't go higher than maybe 40% for small ones, and then not higher than 30% for the grow out. If you do feed them too much protein, it's first of all a waste of money. Protein is expensive, and you can have malnutrition and deformations in them. I personally prefer for the tilapia the floating pellets. I see a bit better if they ate everything, and make sure that the pellet size for the small ones is appropriate so they can swallow it nicely. But do not feed them dust. We often have it with vegetarian food that sometimes is a bit, has a different consistency. It's not extruded that well, so it breaks off. And broken pellets and dust in the food are basically a sign of poor feed quality. So we'll try to avoid that. Because the tilapia is a warm water species, they also like warm water. So in the morning, sometimes they are not that hungry yet if the water is still cold from the night. So wait a bit till they are hungry in the morning if you're feeding them. Same if you have a pond in the morning, sometimes oxygen is a bit low because the algae did not produce any oxygen during the night. So wait till they have enough oxygen to feed properly. And because they have a small stomach, they are herbivorous, it's a bit better to feed them several times a day if possible. Having them in the ponds and our aquaculture system is rather easy because they are very robust. They thrive in like so many different water parameters. They grow in different aquaculture systems, from ponds to cages to tanks to flow through. And because they are rather curious and calm manner, they are all easy to train. They will adapt to you. They are not scared so easily as other fish. If you walk by or walk above them, they are very forgiving and hence very ideal species for aquaculture. Few things, if you handle the tilapia out of experience, they jump, and they jump high and they jump far. And depending on how heavy they are, if like 500 grams jump in your face, that can quite hurt a bit, so be careful there. They also are spiky on top. So when you handle them and when you try to slaughter them, be aware of that and wear good gloves because they can really injure you. What happens sometimes if they have a mortality in the tanks or the ponds, they are cannibalistic. So they will eat weak or dead individuals. And sometimes this masks a little bit the true mortality that you have in your system. So this is something to pay attention to if possible. If you have like a aquaponics system, you have them in a tank, that you are aware how many fish there are. And if they start to disappear, it's one possibility is that they are dying off and that they are just eating each other. If a tilapia is gasping for air in your pond or in your system, oxygen is really low. They are tolerant to low oxygen. So if they tell you directly, I do not have enough oxygen in the water, take that really, really seriously. And if you have them in your aquaculture system as in tanks, when they are adult, I prefer a stocking density of more than 25 kilos, because if it's lower, they tend to get territorial and they stress each other out with a lot of aggression. If you really want to reproduce your tilapia, it is a mouth-brooding cichlid fish. So what happens is after 6 to 12 months, they get mature, they start to be territorial, and the male will start to defend their nests. And then the females would lay their eggs, the male would fertilize the eggs, and then the female would incubate the hatchlings, the eggs in their mouth until they hatch, and even after the hatching, they will keep them for quite a while. So have in mind, reproduction is always like the king discipline in aquaculture. If you don't need to do it, leave it to specialists and just buy your larvae or fingerling supply. If you have to do it, ensure that you have the experience before you start or before you promise somebody fingerlings and then it doesn't go well and you don't have them. So either train in small scale yourself first or buy in the knowledge by hiring some expert that already have a lot of experience with reproduction of now tilapia. If you want to prevent early maturation because you still want to grow them larger than those 500 or 500 grams, one possibility is to have lake cages because the eggs would then just fall through the net and cannot be taken up and incubated. Or you have some sort of polyculture where there's somebody else who basically eats the eggs or the fries. Or as it's mostly done in Europe, you have monosex cultures, all male, or usually you have all male because they grow a bit faster. So that is a very, very short introduction to the Nile tilapia, which I think includes most of the things that are important for us to know if we want to culture them. And the other very interesting species is the African catfish. Have in mind that's also a very, very big word, catfish, because that's actually a whole order. And when we are talking about catfish in our project here, we usually mean the African or sharp-toothed catfish, the clarias. If you're talking to Asians or sometimes Americans, they have their own, the channel catfish, which is a bit different. So be maybe a bit aware of what catfish you're talking about. Catfish, same, is native to large parts of Africa. It's a warm water species, also freshwater, very tolerant to brackish and muddy water. Technically, it's a nocturnal fish, but easily awake during the day, so that's not a problem for us. It can grow very large and very old, but it matures sometimes in husbandry as early as 1 year, a bit earlier. And it actually, one specific thing about them, it has actual lung tissue. So it just not only has the gills, but behind the gills there are lung-like tissues. So they are able to thrive in very, very difficult, low oxygen, very muddy, very warm waters, or even for a certain time outside of the water. This does not necessarily mean that your fish that you have in your tank deal well with very fast and very large changes. So the same as with the tilapia, the group can adapt as long as the changes are slow. In husbandry, you can easily have them somewhere between 20-35 degrees. Short-term tolerance is much wider. They can go a bit higher or a bit lower. They're even more tolerant to low oxygen than the tilapia are, that's clear, a bit higher in salinity. They also are not a fast swimmer, but they prefer the standing water a bit. Same, don't keep them in the direct sunlight. And even they are very, very tolerant. Keep the nitrate lower than 600. It is really a bit better for the fish. Compared to the tilapia, the catfish is omnivorous, but has a lot of animal-based protein in their food. So that one here is a catfish stomach in front, and then the intestines, you can see far, far, far shorter than the one of tilapia. They are bottom feeders, so they like to be on the ground, muddle around a bit. And if they're juveniles, they can be quite cannibalistic. So if you have or buy in small fingerlings, this can be a problem in the beginning. Same as we are, they need protein, fat, and carbohydrates, including all the vitamins and minerals. Same here, if you're interested in making your own food and learn a bit more what nutrient requirements they have, the FAO has, again, a very good site. So if you, again, Google FAO, North African catfish, there's a lot of information. Ensure that the youngs have enough protein. They're rather high with, I want to say, about 50-55%. And then you can go a bit lower for the grow out. Sometimes they are not just fed with dry feed, but also with wet feed. That's easily possible. Just ensure if you make your food on site on your own that you have kind of are reasonably sure that they have all the nutrients that they need. They're the same as tilapia, warm water species. So if it's cold in the morning because it was cold during the night, wait a bit. They might not be that hungry yet, but appetite sure may come if the water gets a bit warmer. And they are not necessarily, you need not to feed them like several times a day. Once, 2-3 times is perfectly normal, but they have a big stomach. They can feed on larger quantities at a time. Having the catfish in your system is amazing because they are so robust, they are resilient, they thrive in so many different waters. They grow in almost all aquaculture systems, and they tolerate high densities. And I got you here like 2 pictures. And personally, even though they tolerate these densities in your system, go with those at the beginning, learn how to deal with the catfish. And when you are sure that you can really ensure water quality, even if these high densities, then you can go there. But that's then difficult to have, and it's a very, very intensive farm. So I prefer those densities over the upper one. Be aware that catfish could technically literally walk away if he doesn't like the water qualities, because they have the gills, the lungs. They can survive out of the water, and they will go out if they want to. Also, they have like 3 spines, 2 at the fins, 1 at the back. Be aware that these can hurt and they bite. So if you're handling these, make sure that people are not scared of and get not bitten too much, because it really hurts a bit. Again, they will be cannibalistic if they can. So eating the weak or the dead individuals within your system can mask a mortality that you have. And when the Clarias is gasping for air, it is really, you have no oxygen in the water anymore, and you should take that very seriously. And an additional thing, they have a very strong skull, so they are not that easy to slaughter. So you need a lot of force in order to slaughter them. Reproducing catfish is a bit different. They're not mouth brooding, they're external fertilization, and they have a seasonal spawning. It's usually beginning of the rainy season. In nature, they would spawn during the night in very shallow waters, and they do not do any parental care. So the eggs get fertilized outside, and then the female will distribute them, and off they go, the little eggs. And they will hatch within a very short time of about 3 days. and then they are ready to eat and swim on their own. In husbandry, again, breeding is like king disciplines. If you don't have to do it, stay away from it and buy your fingerlings from a good supplier. If you can't, ensure that you either start small or buy in your expert. You cannot do the reproduction of catfish like in a almost natural way. It needs usually a hormonal injection. You can stripe the females, but the males usually need to be sacrificed in order to get to the sperm, and then you will mix the eggs and the sperm to artificial fertilization, and then you would raise and incubate the eggs and raise the hatchlings on your own. Those are like two amazing species that we have, and now that we have a bit of an overview where they come from and what they actually need, we can talk about how to keep them healthy. And you need to keep them healthy in order to keep them alive, because that's what you want. You either need them in order to give nutrients to your plants, or you want to sell them at the end for their meat. So keeping them alive is like our top goal. And keeping fish healthy is easier than getting sick fish healthy again. So I'm all for prevention over treatment, because treatment usually is expensive and hard to do, and usually outcome is not even secure. There are a few key aspects of healthy fish that I would like to go through with you one by one. We start with the quality of the fingerlings. We will shortly discuss hygiene protocol on your farm, the quality of the feed and the water. So there is no way that you will have a healthy grow out if you got sick or weak larvae or fingerlings. So having healthy fingerlings is most important. And the problems with raising, it can be poor genetics if the paternal stock was not well. So this can lead to poor growth or even malformations. If your supplier has given the wrong food, they can have deficiencies from the very start that are very hard to catch up during the grow out. And they can come with infections from parasite, bacteria, and viruses. So it is important that you find a supplier that has a well-managed stock, that has a clean farm, whom you trust. Ideally, that can transport the fish to you. Be aware that there are legal aspects of this. In Europe, you have companies that are responsible for the transportation, and usually they are not your fish before they arrive on site. So the moment they arrive on site, then they are your fish and you're responsible, and if they die, it's your loss. We have learned that in Africa, it's sometimes different, that the moment they leave the hatchery, they are yours. So if they die during the transportation, it's your loss. So you already can start with quite a financial hit if the transport doesn't go well, if the fish were not healthy. So be aware that there are legal issues with the contract that you have to care for. Ideally, a fish that are adapted to the feed that you will give them, so wet feed or dry feed for the catfish. And if you have no supplier, it's probably better to have your own hatchery. And then, as we said before, try slow, start small, or buy in your expertise. Once you have the hopefully healthy and well fingerlings in your system, it's important to keep them healthy, and that's prevention. So you want them to keep them clean. So a hygiene protocol is important. Parasites, fungi, bacteria, and viruses can all put a strain on the immune system of your fish. They can cause weakness and illness. They also often facilitate then secondary infections. So they weaken the fish and then something else becomes a problem. And they can reduce the growth, and of course increase, in worst case scenario would be that they increase mortality. Because it's bacteria, parasites is very diverse, so the symptoms are also depending on the infections. Generally, whatever it is, treatment is very difficult, especially in aquaponics systems. So we care for prevention. So we want to import only fish that from a source that you trust. If somehow possible, maybe import them and on your site, and do not put them straight away into your system, but have another tank where it's a quarantine system that you can isolate them first and first see for a few days, are they healthy, are they well? And then you put them into your main system. Larger farms probably can profit from having separate system. Then if something is wrong in one system, you still have a healthy system that basically feeds you and brings money in. Make sure that you rinse your material, your buckets, your nets, your scale after each use with clear water, and then let it dry. That's the best you can do to prevent any infection. Just let the material dry in between completely in a clean place. The idea of having the fish healthy and with as little bacteria around or parasites as possible is if something comes in, if there is a bacteria that is there, if the rest is healthy, the fish will be able to deal with it. Fish are not absolutely not used, especially not tilapia or clarias, used to be in a clean environment. So they deal with all those things well, as long as the environment around them is okay. So good water quality will help you to prevent infections and diseases. The next thing that would be most important would be good food quality. I know it's not always easy to get a food that you know where it comes from and that you know the ingredients. It does matter for the fish. They need their macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And usually in artificial feeds, vitamins and minerals are added, and also sometimes other additives like immunostimulants or something that helps them to digest the stuff a bit easier. So also, nutrients are species dependent. We talked a bit about how tilapia are herbivorous and therefore need less protein than a catfish. It's also life stage dependent. So best you to try to mimic the natural diet as close as you can. If you do self-made recipes, you find a lot online. Ensure that all the nutrients are in when you have the raw material. Be careful when you suddenly switch raw materials because you have supply issues. And be careful if you extrude on your own or you put your pellets together on your own, that they have a good consistency and are stable in the water. So pellet formulation is a science on its own. It's not that easy. And if you do your own feed, ensure good quality. Get out somewhere in like the community that you have here in those projects. They have made their own food before. They have a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of do's and don'ts. Ask people around. Make sure that you get a good recipe for your own fish food. If you feed on site, especially if you feed wet feed, be a bit more careful with hygiene. That stuff can go bad quite fast. So ensure that your fish get not any rotten or like rancid fish feed. The question is then, if you have good feed, is how much to feed and when to feed. So if we are talking about how much, we talk about feeding rates, and that's what we mean is a percentage of body weight that you feed per day. So the smaller the fish are, the higher feeding rates you have. So fingerlings, you can feed to up to 10% of their own body weight, and adults usually would go about 1 to 5%, depending on if you want to stunt them a little bit because you want to wait till they reach their slaughter weight, or if you want to push them a bit. Have in mind that these numbers depend on temperature. Colder water means a lower metabolism and therefore also a lower feeding rate. And it can depend on the oxygen content. So if you have problems with low oxygen, reduce the feeding a bit, because the fish will not have enough oxygen to do proper metabolism anyway, and you put additional strain on the water quality if you feed too much. If you have an automated feeder, still check it daily. I cannot tell you how many times our feeder gets stuck or clogged, so make sure that you feed the fish every day. Still weigh, that's supposed to not be AA, but weigh your fish monthly to ensure that that you feed them really what you think you're feeding them. Easiest is hand feeding. You just feed them ad libitum until they're satiated. And what it looks like a little bit when you're underfeeding the fish is when they are willing to like almost literally leave the water in order to get to the food. So then add a bit more, because fish are so hungry that they like climb on each other in order to get to the food. Overfeeding would look different. That's basically if you throw the food into your tank and the fish do not necessarily care about it, they will not approach the food, and you just have wasted a lot of money if you're adding food that is not getting eaten. Next to the feeding rate, it would then be feeding times. So when during the day do you feed and how often? Feeding times, easy catfish, even they would be nocturnal feed during the day. So you can see what they are doing, how they are feeding. Be careful again in the morning when it's still cold. Wait maybe a little bit till the water is warm. And adults, you feed once, 3 times a day if you wish. And juveniles a bit more often because they need to grow a bit more and their metabolism functions a bit differently. After feeding, the last thing you need is a good water quality. And there I would like to mention 3 parameters. And the first and most important one, like undoubtedly, is oxygen. So fish breathe with their gills. I have you a picture here of the gills, how they work. Basically, it's a counterflow principle. So they make sure that the blood flows so close to the water level that they can exchange oxygen and CO2. And this is how they bring oxygen into their blood. Oxygen dissolves in water a bit differently depending on the water temperature. So the warmer the water is, the less oxygen it can contain. Then we have, next thing will be the saltier the water is, it also can have less oxygen, and high altitudes have less oxygen. So depending where, let's say in Kenya, you have your farm, that can be quite different depending on the altitude that you're on. We talk about dissolved oxygen in water in 2 measurements. You can either say it's milligram per liter, that will be absolute, or you add, like include the water temperature, and then you say it's percentage of the maximum oxygen saturation that you can have. And you see how different it is. 5-degree water can easily have up to 14 milligrams per liter, while at 35, where we can still have our fish, it's only 8. So we will have a lot less oxygen in the water that the fish can breathe from. How do you get oxygen in your system? If you have ponds, be aware that the microalgae are the ones who produce a lot of oxygen during the day. So do not shade your ponds if possible, so that the algae have a lot of sunlight. And make sure that the ponds are big enough, so basically that they do not like run out of water and oxygen. If you have flow-through system, ensure that there's enough flow through the system, and you can have additional aeration. The same is true for recirculating system. Make sure there is a constant flow. If you have a recirculating system, the pump is the heart of the system and always needs to be on in order to keep your fish healthy. And again, you can add aeration if needed. The second water parameter that is important for the fish will be water temperature. Fish are exotherm, poikilotherm, they have the same water temperature in their body than the water around. So this drastically affects metabolism. And it's a bell curve. We said that they have a tolerance level that's quite high, but they still have optimum where they feel most comfortable. That's always in between. And the limits depend on the 2 species, which one you have. Keep your ponds large enough that they can, and in a suitable place, so that you ensure a correct water temperature. And your tanks, you can shade them if they are directly in the sun. You can isolate them, or you can even bury them a bit, at least half in the ground, so they are a bit, there's basically a temperature buffer. Have in mind that active heating or cooling with electricity is very, very energy demanding and can be very expensive, so I would avoid it if possible. Last parameter would be pH. There are processes in a recirculating system that lower the pH, which is nitrification. So if you have a functioning recirculating system, make sure that you keep an eye on the pH and keep increasing it a little bit so that it stays stable. I would stay above 5.5 and I would stay below 8.5 for all of it. Otherwise, things can become more toxic. Be careful with adding a lot of stuff. Try to have your system as stable, as big as possible so that it has a good buffer. And personally, I handle acid as little. If you need to lower pH to stop feeding and add a lot of fresh water, usually this works best before you try to handle anything that lowers the pH actively. So that's all you need to keep your fish healthy and alive. Now there's a big difference for me between healthy and well. Growing fast and efficiently so that you earn money with them because you can sell a lot of good quality meat is something different than just staying alive. So whatever we talked about now, if you just improve that, then make sure instead of being in the tolerance, you are in the optimum, then you already done most that is needed for welfare. There are 3 things I would like to mention shortly, which is stressors are additives. So every stress that you give your fish, be it low oxygen, a chemical stress, or be it a physical stress because you're handling them, causes a negative effect on the body. And those effects depend on how strong the stress was. So was just a human walking by, that's easy to handle. Transport is a severe stress, and how often does it happen? And this adds up. So the more stressor there are, the worse your fish are. So try to not only make sure that you stress them as little as you can, but also that each stressor is smaller, as small as it can be. If you have too much stress that adds up, this then leads to poor welfare, immune system gets impaired, you will have less resilience towards diseases and, of course, also less growth. And in worst case, you really have increased mortality. So how to get from healthy to well? It's easy. You just, instead of being in the tolerance range, you try to be in the optimum range, for example, for all the oxygen, water parameters. And that's it. So instead of stressing them and kind of trying to just be okay with oxygen, keep them in optimal oxygen conditions, and you will have better growth and a better FCR. We had it that you should avoid diseases and illness. If you want to keep them well, and also try to avoid injuries, because they basically lead the way for bacterial and virus and fungi infections. And each little injury, again, adds a stressor. So how to prevent injuries in your system is basically make sure that there are no sharp, no pointy things in the tank. If you handle them, handle the fish as carefully as you can. And many injuries stem also from the fish themselves because they are aggressive towards each other, they bite each other. So if we can avoid that, and you see that your fish has no injuries on the skin, fins, and eyes, that's a good sign and a good, very good point to start for having well fish that will grow very fast in a very efficient way. And what we mean with efficient is basically we want as much fish out of as little food as possible. And the way to measure this is the feed conversion ratio. It's basically how you calculate this is you calculate how many feed you gave the fish and how many kilograms of fish you can harvest in the end. So our FCR around 1 is already very good. If you have unhealthy fish that have a low efficiency, you will need more feed in order to produce 1 kilogram of feed. So healthy fish literally will save you a lot of food and bring you more money. And that's the point, and that's the difference between being healthy and being well. If you're talking about now a lot about how they are, we need methods to assess this in an objective way. It helps if you can note it down, if you can compare, and if you can talk about it in a objective way where you have numbers and measurements. So how do we do that? There are three methods that I really just would like to throw at you shortly, and then I will leave the floor to Morris, who will talk about a survey, it should be survey, that he has done, where we have a bit of better insight into how different people actually view welfare and how they do the assessment. So three things. You can do it quick and dirty. That's very efficient, and all you have to check, you go on site, you watch it, you look at your fish, and you check fins, skin, and eye. The fin should have no holes, no erosion, no redness, no bleeding. If the skin has no wounds, no lesions, no swelling, and the eyes are clear and they have also no wounds on it, that's a healthy and well fish. That's very efficient, very quick, and it's a very assessment I ask, because you basically stand there, look at the fish and ask, how are you? You can do also fast and a bit full. It's very effective is if you check not the fish, but the environment. So you check water quality, you check if the system is clean and well managed. Are there people that understand what they are doing? Do they have a good hygiene protocol? And is the personnel well educated? So instead of asking the fish, because maybe you don't see them because they're in a pond, you ask and look around, is the environment okay for the fish? And the third thing would be if you combine the two, you do it complete and complex. So you look at all 5 things. You look at the farm management, you look at the water quality, you see how the fish are behaving. Do they show normal behavior? Is there anything abnormal, like air gulping, that you really do not want to see and would be a sign of bad water quality? And then you look at the fish from outside, again, skin, fin, and eyes. And if you want, you can also look inside and really check the organs. This is mainly then to check if the feeds are okay. So these are my 3 levels of how I assess fish. I either ask the fish themselves, I check around what is in their environment, or I combine the 2. And now I will give the floor to you, Maurice. You just let me know if I should go to the next slide for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, you can hear me okay, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you also to Ranka and the people in Zurich for inviting me. And you might wonder why I'm here. My name is Morris Villarroel, and I work in aquaponics. So I have worked with aquaponics with Ranka for many years. We've had several projects together. And I also touch on the subject of fish welfare. So if you need more information about fish welfare, feel free to write me as well as Linda. And here in this talk today, we just want to have a team here. We're saying we're working on this questionnaire, which I'll share also in the chat, which has to do with what Linda was mentioning. But instead of looking at more from the scientific point of view, technical, we're looking at consumers. So in the slide from before, where we had these different aspects like water quality, fish behavior, the eyes, the skin, etc., and the fins, this is more saying, well, what do consumers care about really? The first question is, do people really care about fish welfare at all? No? So I would invite you, and kind of, I think we've been here about 45 minutes. I would invite you, if you can, fill out this questionnaire now to get an idea of the questions we're asking. So I think everybody can click on it and try to do the questionnaire. And we'll give you, it should take maybe 3-4 minutes to do. It's quite brief. There are like 15, I think there are 19 questions in total, but they're quite brief. So I don't see anybody responding in the chat, so I guess everybody's doing the questionnaire. If you have any problems, just let me know.
Good morning, all. I have some questions to Mr. Linda. I am Abdel from NARC. I want to ask about alkalinity for tilapia, how we can management alkalinity without any side effect to the fish in aquaculture and aquaponic. Because you know we have sub-tank in aquaculture or aquaponic. I need to inform me how we can apply and management the alkalinity without effect to the fish. Because as you know, if you have aquaponic system, alkalinity we can optimize by dolomite, bicarbonate, and I need to know how we can manage without effect about the nutrient solution inside the aquaponic system. If can Miss Linda or Dr. Linda to inform.
Sala, maybe we can answer that one together because it's an aquaponic system, so it interferes plants and fish together.
Yeah, Linda, I already wrote in the chat that we will have closer look in this for the webinar on the water chemistry in aquaculture, because this goes really well together with that webinar. So the
and when
question
will
is if
that
you
one
want
be?
to quickly answer now, or because I mean this is a long answer to a complicated question of how to do that in different systems.
Okay, it's okay for me. We can answer for these questions later, but I have another questions about nutrients to the fish in aquaculture or aquaponic about adding iron, because as you know, for the feeding, the iron not have in the pellet, and as you know, the aquaponic or aquaculture, especially iron not release, so the plant cannot have iron from the aquaculture, need to supply by foliar application or by decoupled aquaponic system. So the fish need iron. How we can apply the iron to the aquaculture or aquaponic system? In single recirculation aquaponic system, not decoupled.
Having enough, so is it because the plants have a deficiency or the fish? If the fish have like
Fish, because I know the concentration for the iron is very toxic. Is there any ideal sources to iron to aquaponic or aquaculture to add iron to the aquaculture or aquaponic in single recirculation aquaponic system?
What did you, Sala, you added iron to our aquaponic system 3 weeks ago because the plants were suffering, but the fish were fine.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wrote for this question again in the chat. I'm so sorry for that. With iron, it's like this. The amounts that are provided with the fish feed are sufficient for the fish, but not sufficient for the plants. That's why, because we would like to provide perfect conditions for the fish. We do not want to add more iron via the fish feed, because the goal is that you have perfect conditions for the fish and also try to make better conditions for the plants. So the best way that the plants can take up the iron, it's in liquid form. So most of the cases, what you can do, if you would like to completely avoid adding any iron in the water, you can provide the foliar application of the iron directly on the plant leaves. Or if this is not sufficient, normally in home systems, sometimes people add a bit of iron into the water, but then you keep it lower as 1 milligram per liter, so that it's not toxic for the fish. Some of them go a bit higher. Or if you want to have a production system based on aquaponics, it's better to decouple the system. Like this, you make sure that everybody is happy, fish and the plants.
Okay, I have last questions. Miss Linda is like inform us about ideal two fishes about like catfish and tilapia to aquaponic system or aquaculture. Here in Jordan, we have like winter, okay, and we cannot stocking the tilapia. So you recommended any other type of fish to use in winter to aquaponic and aquaculture that meet cold, like barramundi or sea bass, is ideal to aquaponic system and can be handled easy, or like tilapia is, as you know, tilapia can survive at very difficult situation. It's okay for the tilapia. So can you suggest any cold fish to aquaponic according to our situation?
Can you help me out with what does cold mean for Jordan in winter. What are we?
Cold water temperature in aquaponics.
Are we talking about 2 degrees or are we talking about 15
like 10
degrees?
10 degrees to 20, like
in winter? So that's
yes.
a bit, that's tilapia can still handle it, but they will not grow a lot and they will not be so happy about it. So other species are well. Be careful with thinking about sea bream, sea bass, because then you are in saltwater species and Sala's plants will not be happy. It's if you still want to have a coupled system, I would recommend to stay with freshwater species. It's also a question of your customers. If consumers are not used to eat certain fish species, it does not help if you can grow them, because you will not be able to sell them or to bring them to the people. What could be a species would be carps. Do you have like local carp species that thrive well in nature or in Jordan?
Here in Jordan, we most the fish you like eat is like tilapia. Okay, very familiar. Okay, barramundi I think come from outside from Jordan, but I want to ask there if there are any possibility to use like barramundi in aquaculture in winter, because what I know it's like cold water temperature, this kind of fish.
Is barramundi, how cold can they go? I need to check. I would not go. I don't.
If you have, you can answer me later, okay?
Sure.
Because I think it's like limiting time here.
Yes.
So
Let me get you back on the barramundi. If he handles fresh water, cold water, the plants will be fine with it. And barramundi is a aquaculture species that does well. But
it's
I'm not
around
sure.
25 to 30 degrees more or less.
But they're not that cold.
No.
So if possible, I still see the carp. But let me get back to you on that one. And we ask Maurice if people have. I think people are ready with having answered the questionnaire.
Okay. Okay, yeah, well, if you agree, I'll just finish this part. I have like 3 or 4 more slides. And then Linda, you'll continue a bit and we have questions at the end. This is some of the results we've had. This questionnaire, so far we have about 500 replies. This is from an ELISA project, so we're talking about Spain, and a lot of the respondents were Spanish, so we're talking about Europe, where there's an increasing, let's say, preoccupation by consumers about fish welfare. The question 8 was wild caught or farmed. A lot of people, this is in Spain mostly, from about 500 answers, don't know if the fish that they're buying are wild caught or farmed. Part of this is it's difficult. And if we say aquaponic, we have to make sure we're telling them what kind of origin they have, no? And there's kind of a medium concern from people. It's maybe low to medium. I was thinking it could be very low, but it's not very high. So this is like a medium concern about consumers for fish welfare. A lot of them, as it shows in this graph, you say, yes, these are different age groups on the bottom, on the x-axis. So if you're 0 to 20 years old, so more than 60, almost across the board for age groups, they think that fish welfare improves the quality of the product. And this is important related to what Linda was saying before, no? We kind of, it's a win-win situation where I think if we portray that we're improving fish welfare, if we're actively working on fish welfare, consumers will understand that this also is improving the product and they could be happier with that product. And not a lot of people are aware of certification labels. That's partly because there are very few labels on the market that certify concepts related to fish welfare. One example could be ASC, Aquaculture Stewardship Council. And surprisingly, although this does tend to happen to other species, more than half, almost reaching 3/4, say they're willing to pay more for fish that have a better welfare. Okay, next slide. And this one, there were some questions now in the chat. Here we're trying to compare, what people think as consumers about the welfare of a horse, so the mammal, the horse, laying hens, compared to fish and different types of fish, trout, salmon, sea bass. What we found here, I'm using my pointer, I don't think you can see it, but you can see in the trout, salmon, and sea bass, the average answers are that people think they have a poor to acceptable kind of welfare, but they're quite similar among those three species. So I think people mentally think about fish in general. We're talking before about barramundi, tilapia, catfish. As a consumer, you're probably thinking it's all the same thing. Whereas I think part of what Linda was saying is that it's not exactly the same thing. We could have different welfare problems in different points. But compared to mammals, yes?
Maurice, can I just stop you a bit before you continue? Can you explain the difference between sea bass, salmon, trout, laying hen, and horse? Because according to the chat, some people are struggling to understand
I think there was.
Which species are you talking about?
Yeah, okay. I was trying to explain at the beginning. I think there was one question about that. So if you're looking at a horse, like a riding horse, like, horses used in for riding or for meat, what is your impression about their welfare? Do you think the welfare is excellent? And a lot of people think, well, here it's about 15% thinks that their welfare is excellent compared to a laying hen, so hens that are used for production of eggs, and compared to rainbow trout and salmon, which are kind of cousins. So salmon production and trout production in Europe is fairly big. As you know, trout is fairly big in Italy and in Spain. And sea bass is I don't know if it's such a local species, but comparable to sea bream, a Mediterranean saltwater fish. So these are that would compare to trout, whether you compare freshwater trout to kind of saltwater sea bass. So I guess people can kind of maybe, if you look those up on Google, you can see some images. So I think I basically explained this one, and I have 2 more slides. Can you go to the next one? And people are thinking, why am I doing this questionnaire? Why are you asking me these things? Well, it turns out there's an increasing social interest and impact about fish welfare, especially in Europe, although there has been some work more in Canada and the States, Australia. And I think you're starting to see it in other countries. For example, we've had requests for talks from Turkey. I think in Asia, people are starting to look at this, but how can they explain that their fish have good welfare? Why is this? Well, there's been a number of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who have hired or paid or organized campaigns for actors or actresses. For example, we see an example here on YouTube, where they're kind of saying that fish welfare is an issue. We have to look at it, and they're kind of denouncing in some ways the aquaculture industry itself, saying it hasn't been taken into consideration. So there's an increasing preoccupation with this from the part of consumers. As we have seen in the past, people started to worry about welfare in cattle, dairy cattle, pigs, etc. So there's kind of a new wave coming for fish as well, which might be new to some of you, but has been kind of going on in Europe in the past 5 years, I say, has been really increasing. With the idea that there might be legislation in the future that will, for example, tell people, like, you have to stun fish before you kill them. You can't just kill them outright, for example, depleting their gills or something. There has to be a process. Other processes, what Linda was talking about, these 5 frames about water quality, etc. That might have to be, how do you say, obligatory on the farms. So in other words, people actually have to carry out all these measurements. It's not going to be just enough to keep them alive, okay? Not only in Europe, but the OIE the international animal, I don't know the acronym right now, but Oficina Internacional de Epizooties from Paris, they're also promoting not legislation, but agreements that have to do with fish welfare on an international level. Okay, and last one. Apart from the actual legislation, there are actually some certification bodies, for example, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, which is very international, and there has one of their main offices in Singapore, and they do work with producers in Asia. They are promoting different principles for aquaculture in general, which could even touch on aquaponics. Principle 1 is more legal stuff, management stuff. Principle 2 has to do with not affecting the environment. But they've added principle 3, going clockwise, is about human rights as well. So not forced child labor on farms, etc. And principle 4 is a new one. This is just new this year. And it's going through a stakeholder procedure to see, making sure everybody agrees, but it includes welfare. Welfare where? Well, handling on the farm, especially talking about slaughtering the fish, and different aspects related to health. No? So I just wanted to kind of put that out there in addition to what Linda was mentioning, that this is a social aspect. Consumers are demanding things. It's not just from the production side. And there's also, we will see more of this in the future, different certification bodies which are promoting labels that in order to be able to sell your fish, ASC, for example, certifies products that come from IKEA on an international level. In order to be able to sell to IKEA or some other companies, you might have to comply with some of these aspects related to fish welfare. And I think that's it. Linda, is there one more? I think this is the last one. Basically, today was maybe to get some of your feedback through the questionnaire. If you've already filled it out, thank you. About what is your opinion? Like, how do you feel as consumers what good fish welfare would look like? Is it enough for you to know about water quality, fish health, fish behavior? These are the 3 main aspects that are included in this manual that I've shown here, Welfare Indicators for Farmed Atlantic Salmon, which is a huge document, more than 350 pages, made by the Norwegian salmon industry. So I think this is a reference manual for welfare in fish, at least in an intensive level in Europe and probably international. And they basically talk about water quality, fish health, and fish behavior. Maybe there are other aspects which we're missing or they're important to consumers that could show up in these kind of surveys. Okay, so I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much about fish assessment and how we start to think about it more and more in different regions. So I have a few more slides before we can, I'm curious, I do not have a good eye on the chat. I think Sala is onto that, but maybe in the end we have time for a few more interesting questions. Now that we said a bit, how do we assess, what do we evaluate in order to understand whether the fish are healthy and well? I think it's important to talk, how do we now bring this knowledge onto a farm or into a system? And there are 3 things that I would like to mention that I really believe in and that really we try also on our farms to implement as often and as permanently and long-term as we can. Those are checklists and routines. And then there's a documentation process, and it is the training of the employees. So we'll go through this. We and our system have every day somebody that goes and check on the different system and the different fish. So we make it rather easy. Nothing more is needed than an Excel sheet. This is ours from one of my tanks, where every day somebody goes and says, yes, I was here, you sign with your name, and then you are responsible that when I was here, I checked everything and everything was fine. And you can see that we check water parameters, we count how many, or we have an overview of how many fish. So if you put in, you see a dead fish, you take it out, you put in the numbers, say I found 5 dead fish here, then this will automatically calculate, okay, tomorrow there will be only 74 fish. If there's something with the feeder or something that special you noticed. So when the next person comes the next day, they will see whether you made a note, whether there was something with the system. A simple Excel table, a simple list, sometimes it's easier to have them on paper and not digital, where everybody knows what to check every day. There are things that need checking only every week. You see that water parameter we measure only once a week. And there are things you only need to do once a month or once a year if it's like maintenance. But this, if you have a system where several people works, this ensures good teamwork. This ensures that everybody has an overview of what happens with the system the last few days. And this is what kind of makes problems trackable and preventable and traceable. And with the checklist come routines. Routines for me is things you, like in your genetics, you do this in a regular method. This can be cleaning the outlet. It can be filling up the feeder. It can be checking whether the water pump is still running properly. It can be whatever maintenance on the system and checking the fish. So these routines, even though it's maybe not yet absolutely necessary to clean the grid or the outlet today, if you do it on a regular basis, you know you will prevent any big incidents and emergency. So daily checklist, daily routine, everybody knows what to check. This is what will keep your system secure, what will keep your system running, and you have your fish in your system. So if the system is not running, the fish are not safe. The second thing is documentation. So there is so many things that can go wrong. That can go wrong, and you make mistakes every time. And the only thing that counts is that you learn from what you have done and you note down what you did to solve a problem or what you did wrong, and then something went wrong, something happened, and next time you know to not do that. Write it down. I have no clue what I did wrong a year ago if I do not have my notes. Write manuals. Keep the manuals for all your pumps, for all your machines, for all the processes. Write your own SOPs, so your standard operating protocols, and make sure that everybody knows where they are. So there's nothing more scary than if you are in the evening alone in a system and you do not know how to repair your pump, because you will lose the fish during the night. So make sure that documents are available to everybody, that everybody can read them, knows where they are. And also part of the documentation process for us is that you keep track on the biomass of the fish. So we have an Excel table. It's a simple Excel table where you write in, today I fed that much food, and therefore I estimate that tomorrow my fish will be that heavy. And then you know how much food you have to feed tomorrow, so that every day you feed them the right amount you want them to feed in order to make sure that they grow as efficient and as fast as possible to the slaughter weight that you need. And what we have as a last important documentation on site with the system, we have target sheets. So at every system I have, there is a print out and laminated one A4 sheet where I write down where do I want the system to be so the fish in the system are healthy. So if they are tilapia, we say, hey, in our system, it should be 25 to 29 degrees. If it's outside of this tolerance, what can you do? And if it's really bad, what actions do you need to take and whom do you inform? So what parameter, where do I want the systems to be? Where does it really has to be? And what do I do if it is outside of the optimum or if it even outside of the tolerance? So this target sheet we physically hang at every system we have with the right fish in it, because we have different fish species. You come to a different system and then you need to change your thinking and say, okay, now I have warm water tilapia. The next system may be cold water trout. So those are the three things. Document, have your SOPs ready. Your target sheet needs to be visible next to your system so that everybody, even in the evening when they are already tired, can quickly check, is the temperature okay? And the third thing is your people on the ground. You need to have people that understand how important the health of the fish is for their own benefit. Keep your fish healthy, earn money with them. So train your people. Everybody knows why they are trying to take care of the fish, why they are feeding them when. The better you train your people on site that are handling the fish on a daily basis, the more secure your system will run and the healthier your fish are. And there are a bit two different philosophies that you can have. You can run an experience-based system, which means there's one or two people around that have a lot of experience that they acquired over time by trying and by failing. And then there are those people are responsible to keep the system running, and all the knowledge is with them. For better or worse, if those people are on holidays or they do not work there anymore, or the knowledge and experience goes away with them. Another philosophy is to have a knowledge-based system. So all the know-how is somehow available to the whole team. It means everything is written down, all the SOPs are there, all the manuals are there, everything you learn from your experience, you write down and make sure everybody has access to it all the time. And you can be somewhere in between. Maybe there are things that everybody needs to know, things not everybody needs to know. But those are the two main philosophies you can have, either knowledge, experiences with the people, or it's with like documents and everybody has access to it. And whatever way you go, make sure your people know this, so they either know where to look for which document or which person to ask if they need help or see something is wrong with the system or something is wrong with the fish. Once you have that, the farm is secure, the farm is well documented. We still here in this webinar are in a train-the-trainer situation. And I cannot strengthen enough how important the people are for the fish and the other way around. So the question is, how do you that are in this webinar now pass on everything that you have learned within the project or within the courses that you take, or even within this webinar? And there are two things that I would like to mention is capacity building and responsible consulting. As for the capacity building, there are so many things that you can rely on. And the first thing is if you go out and consult somebody, or if you try to establish this technology in your local area, you need to learn the theory of fish farming and you need to acquire some hands-on experience. I strongly believe that you cannot teach somebody how to raise a fish if you never have handled the fish on your own. Build yourself a network of people that you can go ask. I am a fish person and I'm not a plant person. Every time somebody asked me about, as we just had, plants in aquaponics, I go and I had no sala will have an answer for me. Build your own system with networks of people that you know can answer your question that you have. And understand that there are a lot of possibilities of aquaculture and aquaponics and hydroponics, but there are also limits. And it's important to know the limits and when a system is not suitable for a situation or for an area. Know your target. If you consult farmers or you have your employees, or as Maurice was talking about, think of the consumer and the customer. In the end, if you have raised your fish and you have nobody who would eat them, or you've raised your plants or grown your plants and nobody's eat them, it was all for nothing. know your local supplies. What kind of food do I have available? What kind of material do I have available? I cannot recommend a system with concrete basins if there is no concrete available in the local area. There can also be very different laws and regulations from country to country, or even from region to region, and you must ensure that you do not consult somebody doing something that actually is not within, that's basically would be illegal, right? And go to the local market and understand norms and the customs. That's why I asked before, when we talked about, the question was what cold water species to raise in Jordan. What are people used to eat? If you then all of a sudden try to grow salmon there and nobody's used to eating salmon, you didn't do your market research well. So locally, they're mainly carps, the common carp and tilapia. So if you're searching for cold water species, go with the common carp. Think long term. Please think establish an infrastructure that is long lasting and teams that can handle the system and the fish over more than a year or two. And be aware that all the systems that you may build within such a project that we're having now may need financing, and they need financing until they are self-sufficient. And always anticipate problems of not only today, but also tomorrow. You have a lot of materials available and search them online. They are, and think what your customers, what your people or local people have access to. It may be you do not have good internet, so do not recommend them doing like online courses, but make sure that they have, maybe they have mobile phones where they can have a local app on the phone, and there you can learn a lot from. Have in mind that whatever we are talking about, our common language is usually English, but it may not be the language that you should write your SOPs in. Ensure that everybody can read your SOPs and your manuals on site in their, ideally in their native language, and use maybe instead of many words, rather icons or graphics or animations. There are a lot of helps that I would like to show you now. There's tools and apps, and there are templates for Excel tables. And one of them would be from our side. That would be an app that you can download if you Google My Fish Check. It is a mobile phone app to assess fish welfare. A very cool thing is My Fish Manager. It's also a mobile phone app that helps you to organize your farms in small scales. How many food comes in, how many fish I sold, how much was the price. This is a very good help for your phone on, to manage properly small scale farms. What you have also newly is a tilapia welfare app. It was specifically made for Nile tilapia, and it helps you to assess the health and the welfare of the fish. For you as a trainer, I think what you could do, really suggest to do it, would be the mock aquaponics. It's an online course that guides you through circular economics and all the aspects of aquaponics. Soon to come will be Aquasmart. It will be a tool that will help to organize and assess tilapia from Tanganyika tilapia. And what I cannot recommend enough, there is Samakipoa. It is, if you Google this word, you will have to register for free. And then you have access to about 20 fish videos that are very well animated and explain you from feed management, water quality, to business planning, to farming. And I cannot recommend that one enough. It's done very well. And it's specifically for low-tech pond and aquaponics. It's very well done. Do those. You have to watch the videos, and then you have to answer the questions. So you have to show that you understood what you are doing. This is an absolutely great help. So Google Samakipoa and we will get there. The last thing I would like to talk to you about is responsible consulting. You will go somewhere to your local people and either have your own system and maybe talk to people about having a system, or you actively try to consult people on building their own system. And it is not about you, it's about them. So listen to the needs of the people that you try to help and solve their problems, not yours. And think of the whole value chain within your country. So maybe it's helpful to have not only be involved in fish farming, but then also the value chain afterwards. So where are the markets? Where can I get, where can I actually sell the fish? Where can the farmers make money with the fish? Have in mind that the supply chain goes the other way. So where do the farmers get the fish from? Where do they get the feed from? If farmers have problems to get proper feed, that's a huge issue. And that's something, before you then advise them to increase their farm, you need to solve that bottleneck. So listen to where the people actually have problem and what problems they need to be solved. Have in mind that there is no size that fits all. Aquaculture systems are very adaptable, from recirculating pond flow through, how big they are, how many pumps there are. That's very adaptable, but you need to find the right system to put on the right place with the right fish. And this includes that you think about the capacity of the farmers. How many people could he even hire? What are the financial capacities at the beginning? Do not advise people to buy or build system that basically, if they would fail, ruin them financially. You will bring people into danger. So plan for surprises, plan for changes, and advise people carefully. I am a big fan of slow and steady wins the race. So start small with the fish farms, have people first to build a prototype, get used to the tilapia or the catfish or the common carp if they are new to aquaponics or aquaculture. And then once they build the knowledge, they are safe, they know what they are doing, then you can grow a farm, and then you also can invest more money. So have in mind the people that you are consulting and be careful to consult them wisely, long-term, and in their interest. So that would be everything from my side. I was told by Sala that I can ask you to help me out in the form of a homework. And I prepared, and Sala will give you this Excel table, similar to the one you people got from last time. And I would be very, very interested if you could find out, either for tilapia or catfish or both, what are the local parameters that they are grown in your regional area? So what are the considered optimal parameters for the strains or species or population that you have? If you maybe have access to a food, try to get the label and how much does it cost, what's the company, how much fat is in there, how much fiber, all those information. It would be so helpful and so interesting to have from such a diverse audience that you are now get the information from different countries and different locations. And if you have completed this, maybe I write also down a little bit where you get the references from, and then you can send the list as an Excel file to me, and I will put them together. So that will be everything from my side. Sala, I've seen that there was a lot going on in the chat. Are there any open remaining questions that we should answer?
Yes, I have one. The rest, I think we will try to answer. We also with some other webinars, but Georg had really good question on what is there a correlation between feeding time and fish welfare? For example, is it counterproductive if I feed my fish at different times and mostly in the afternoon? So how does it work?
For a pond or for a pond system, the afternoon is a good time because you're sure it's you have enough oxygen produced by the algae, so the fish have enough oxygen to basically then digest the food that you're giving them. There's also the idea that in the tank system it's a bit warmer, so even in your areas, especially if we talk about Jordan, then in winter, 10 degrees will be too cold for even carbs to eat. So afternoons are a bit better when it's a bit warmer. I would listen, basically just ask the fish. If you come in the morning and you give a handful of food and nobody reacts to the food, do not feed them. If you see that in the afternoon my fish eat better, then do that. There's one argument to feed in the morning more than in the afternoon. And this is aggression within the group caused by hunger. So we had this, if you have maybe catfish more because they're a bit more predatory, we have this often with carnivorous fish. When they are hungry, then there's a lot of stress in the tank in the morning, and they didn't get feed during the night, so stomach is empty, we're hungry, and we feed a bit more in the morning so that everybody has breakfast and then everybody can calm down a bit, and you feed a bit less in the afternoon when the fish are not that hungry anymore. So depends on the system and the species, and to figure out which one to do, you just try by hand and look, when are they feeding best? When are they approaching the food? When they are feeding everything, and how fast are they feeding? And then you will get your answer basically by just asking the fish what to do.
Yeah, just to add to that, Linda, there's something also in the literature about the distribution of the feed, like maybe not always feed at the same point, but make sure it's distributed in the tank, because some fish might be, let's say, lower down on the hierarchy scale or something, and they might not always be close to the feeder or close to where you're feeding, so distribute it around the tank.
Does it answer the question, George?
Yes, in the system I work with, there's mostly herbivores. So I think that basically concludes it very well for my setup.
I think we are really good in time. So with this, maybe there is another question for Maurice about the environmental enrichment.
Yeah, I guess that's a topic that's quite new, at least in aquaculture, but the environmental enrichment is basically enriching the kind of barren environment that exists actually. So if you're thinking about a tank system where there's basically water in the tank and the walls, you can
Maurice,
enrich.
you have a very strong echo. Can you change something?
I have a strong echo. Is this new, or I always had it?
Before it was fine. Now you have it, and everybody else it's muted, so it has to be on your side.
Yeah, there's an echo now still. Okay, I can try to put my headphones, but I did that before and something.
Now we don't hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure then.
Now it's okay. I think.
Yeah, is it better?
Yeah.
So environmental enrichment is just a new topic where, for example, I apply floating objects in the water, so that provides a bit of shade to the fish, and they can move around these metal objects or wooden objects in the water. I could provide different flows of water at different times of the day. So I'm adding to the complexity of the environment. So if you look up environmental enrichment in farm animals, you can find maybe more examples. So that the idea is that if you enrich the environment, the fish will have a more complex behavior pattern, and it tends to protect them against future stresses. So if I have to stress them by catching them and classifying them, if they are in an environmentally enriched environment, this stress is less on their system than if they're It's just always in a barren environment. Okay.
Then with this, thank you very much. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Morris. And then see you in 14 days. Michael will take it over.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Maybe,
Bye-bye.
wait, just a moment.
Okay.
Maybe you can provide a link, Maurice, to your paper on environmental enrichment, so
Yeah.
that we can send that link out to, because I really think this is very interesting what you found there.
Okay, yeah, it's related
You
also
can send
to,
it to me and I will include it into the email that
Yeah.
I often send after the webinar.
very good. Okay, I'll send it to you as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
And see all of you in 14 days. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
to the presenters. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Linda, Ranka,
Thanks,
Zala.
Maurice.
Awesome presentation, Linda. Great. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.